So good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start by first thanking Jeanette Foreman, a friend of mine and a friend of yours,
That's
because
right. And that makes it happen.
this is my dream interview. I told
Oh,
my
good.
kids and my friends that this is the interview of my life.
Well, thank you. I'll try to say something that makes sense.
So this is my 25th year of following your work. So it's 25th anniversary of the me and you that you didn't know existed. So
I'll take
it,
it.
it starts with for me, um Oprah, the Oprah Book Club selection. That's where it starts. But I,
Mhm.
I just stayed after that. So let me I just wanted to tell you that up front in case I fan out. So okay. So let me introduce myself. I am Kim Delaney. I'm a writer also, and I'm a retired professor of African American Studies. I ran the African American Studies department at Chicago State University. I live in Chicago. I'm currently the vice president of education and programs at DuSable Museum. And I asked a friend of mine, a fellow writer, an English instructor, I extended an invitation for her to exist because I know she loves you as well. So you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. Good morning, Kim, and good morning, Mrs. Cleage. I have known about you like since I was in college, and one of the things that I remember was your editorial or something about on Vibe magazine when Notorious B.I.G. and Faith Evans were on the cover.
Oh,
So I
about that
remember,
cover. Oh my goodness.
yeah,
Yes,
I
that
remember you saying you looked at it for, you bought it and looked at it for a week. You said, I looked at it for a week. You just
yep.
couldn't take your eyes off it. And I remember you just saying, this is the kind of thing that makes women think again. I remember that line, it makes them think again. Um, and then because I had been aware of your plays, like particularly Flying West. I just was so impressed with just your I'm going to say imagining. I'm going to say recording of women, um, that I just knew you were a voice that I would always keep up with. I'm just so happy that Chicago is honoring you now. And
Me
I'm
too.
so
Me
happy to
too.
talk to you. All right,
Thank
that's
you.
all I want to say.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love talking to people who love my work. So ask me anything.
So let me say, since Camille mentioned that, Ms. Clegg, we are in the midst of uh, Pearl Cleage Festival here in Chicago.
I know.
Yeah, and so I saw Miss Jeanette at a couple of events, and she said, "You just gonna take in all the pearls." They did first I went to see at the Goodman. I am a season ticket holder at the Goodman, but when I saw that play coming, I just brought 10 people with me, and we went to see it. Me and the ladies, we went out to dinner, and then we went to the play, and um, and then this week I went to hear a reading by Jackie Taylor at her
Madam
theater.
Mouse.
Yeah, Madam Miles, and she did that thing well. She had a horn behind her, and that was Monday of this week. And it's still going on all here, all around Chicago. And so it's just exciting to have your work highlighted, and it's very exciting to have you here. Perry, you want to introduce yourself right fast?
Hi, I apologize for being late, but good morning, Ms. Cleage. I am Perry Diggs. I'm Education and Programs Assistant.
Good morning.
Hmm.
So, okay, so Miss Clegg, let's start at the beginning. Let's start, or where at the beginning, where I think the beginning is, and that is with your. Let's start with your dad. Do people ever ask you about your dad? This is amazing. You know,
Mhm.
I'm asking about that because I'm a Black Studies scholar. So, while I definitely love your work, I am also so understanding of that connection and the impact that connection probably had on your work. So can you talk a little bit about your dad and how now that you're older, you know, more mature, how do you think that shaped your writing at all, if at all? or influenced you
Oh,
right
I
now?
think there's no way I can even begin to say how much it shaped it. My father was a minister, a very charismatic minister, very brilliant man, and Reverend Albert Clegg was his name, and then later he took an African name, Jeramogi Baby Ajaman. He founded the Shrine of the Black Madonna. You know, every church had a bookstore in it, so we had bookstores all over the country. He was an amazing person. And I knew it even as a little kid. You know, I used to go to church every Sunday, of course, being the preacher's kid. But I used to love to hear my father talk about such complicated ideas. And I knew he had been preparing the sermon, you know, reading Frantz Fanon, reading all of these things, thinking about all of these things all week. And then when he would get up on Sunday morning, he was able to translate all of those very sophisticated political, social ideas into language that regular hardworking Detroit people could understand. And I always admired that. And I always wanted to do that in my own work, to not be a writer where you had to have a dictionary because all the words were up here. So you had to go through the book and look up the word and all that. And I know some writers I admire who are like that. But my father was able to communicate without you having to bring to it a PhD, without you having to bring to it advanced information. And that I think is so valuable. Also, the fact that he was such a wonderful speaker, I think is part of what shaped me as a playwright, because I understood the power of a spoken word, of how someone who really knew how to speak to people could inspire them to do things. And I wanted to be able to write characters on the stage who were as believable as real people, and also hopefully could inspire people to think about things differently. So my father, my mother was also an activist. My stepfather, my whole family was activists. So they all were very much a part of shaping who I am. They never tried to. I have an older sister, and they never tried to make us be a teacher or a nurse or something specific, but we knew whatever we chose to be had to be tied toward the freedom struggle of Black people. And it didn't matter what you were doing. Part of what you were supposed to be doing as a member of our family was helping to uplift the race. And it sounds so old fashioned when you say it now, but it's like that was the mission of our family. So it was like I loved writing, and I also loved the fact that my writing was connected to something bigger.
So listen, in Detroit, you grew up in Detroit, right?
Yes.
So in
Hmm.
Detroit, did you know Aretha Franklin? I know you had all your through through the Shrine of the Black Madonna, you saw a lot of famous people and things. So did you know Aretha Franklin? Did you ever cross her path? And then um
I have a great Aretha Franklin story. No,
okay.
I did not know Aretha Franklin, but Aretha Franklin's father, who was also a great, charismatic, amazing preacher, their church was like maybe 3 blocks from our church on the same street, Linwood Avenue. So we had to pass their church to get to our church. My father was always very political, so the number of people in our church would fluctuate, because if he would get so radical, some people would be afraid of that and they would leave. So that one day we were going to church, and Aretha was in town. She was singing at her dad's church, but out front there were people waiting to get into this church. It was like a rock concert. There were so many people, and we're going down the street to our little church where there were dedicated people, but no crowd like that. And my father, who I loved dearly, said to me, you know, if you could sing like that, we'd have crowds like that in our church too. And I wanted to say, well, you're in big trouble, because I can't do that for you. I would do anything for you, but I cannot sing. And Reverend Franklin could sing too. My dad couldn't sing either, but it was so funny to me because he was just annoyed that people
Yeah.
were, you know, we're all standing there waiting to hear Aretha, and we're not waiting to hear the message. But I never knew Aretha Franklin. She was,
Okay.
you know, she was already you know, an amazing presence in and around Detroit. But you know, that's the great thing about Detroit, was there was always so much music. I went to high school. I went to all public schools in Detroit, and my high school was like 2 blocks from Motown.
Oh,
So they would have open auditions, you know. So people from my school who had been practicing in the downstairs boys' bathroom all week, they would go down there and hope to be the next Temptations. We didn't ever try to audition. We would just try to walk past it, hoping we would see the
right.
Temptations,
Okay.
hoping we would see Smokey Robinson. But
Okay.
the musicians were everywhere. There was Detroit is a music town.
Wow. Did you also have in Detroit in those days, did you have the presence of the Nation of Islam a lot and all
Same
that?
street, Linwood Avenue, same
That's
street. The
great.
mosque was right there. I mean, it was like
Wow.
right there together on the west side of Detroit. All of that, yeah. And my father was a person who was a friend of Malcolm X, so that
Wow.
um, I knew some of the people at the mosque, but I never was a person who went to the mosque. I was going to my own church, but all of those churches were right there together. The mosque was there. Reverend Franklin's church was there. Our church was there. So there was a lot of spirit activity right there in that zone.
Wow. And then did you move directly to Atlanta
I
from there?
went to Washington first. I went to Howard University for 3 years.
Oh, okay,
So I
all
went
right.
from Detroit to Howard, and then I came to Atlanta and finished college at Spelman.
Okay, so I saw that Howard, Spelman, and Clark you went to.
I did,
Yeah.
and I even went to library school for a hot minute because I was trying to find a way to be an artist, to be a writer, and make a living. And there was
Wow.
a wonderful grant offered to me, the Ford Foundation. I think it was Ford, but they were trying to encourage young Black people to go into library work. And I love to read. So I said, this would be a great job for me as a writer. I've been in the library all day. And they told me my first semester I had to take a whole class in the Dewey Decimal System. And I
Wow.
said, this is so not for me. Great scholarship, but I cannot do it. I am so not interested in the card catalog. That is not mine. But I did. I went to lots of Black colleges, had a great time all the time. Didn't always stay to finish, but I wouldn't trade those experiences. I love HBCUs. I'm a big fan.
So tell me, your work is so, it's just so fresh and honest. It seems so honest. Um, where do you find the courage to write the things you write? I think I mentioned Mad at Miles, and during that time when you wrote that book, were you afraid? Was there backlash? What?
I wasn't afraid. There was, of course, there was some backlash from people who love Miles Davis, who don't want you to ever say a bad word about Miles Davis. And I was like, I'm not talking about the music. That's why I'm mad, because I love the music. And then I read his autobiography and read all of the really awful things he said about being violent toward women and just all of those things. So that's what that piece is about. How do you um, bring together the
Yeah.
wonderful work that an artist can do with the fact that they're not such a great person
Mhm.
in their real life. But I was at that point, that Mad at Miles was written as a performance piece. I used to do performance art. And my husband, Zarin Burnett, had created a performance environment called Club Zebra. And we did for 10 years, we did work in there called a series called Live at Club Zebra. And it was set up like a nightclub. People actually thought it was a nightclub. And it was kind of an illegal speakeasy because we were serving drinks. We had no liquor license or anything, but
Okay.
we would set up and do these things. And I did Mad at Miles there for the first time. And my husband, is a serious Black man, and so I felt like I could say anything because he would not have allowed someone to disrespect me in that space. And there was actually, when I did the piece one night, a guy who was trying to, talk back from the audience, and it was a little space, like a little club. And I saw my husband walk over and stand like right beside the guy, and he leaned down and said something to the guy, and then the guy got real quiet. And I thought to myself, he just must have told the guy, if you don't stop and listen, we're going to put you out of here.
Right.
But
Right.
the idea of, I never was afraid of people like hurting me or coming to me. The worst thing that ever happened is they would come and sit, the Miles Davis fans would come and sit in the front like this. They'd be mad. But the piece uses humor to try to say, would you all feel that way if it was someone like Kenny G, who at the time people were buying his music a lot? Would you, my brothers who were talking to me about this, would you feel the same if it was a musician like Kenny G, who was beating up Black men all over the country? And they would laugh because Kenny G is kind of a little guy, a little hippie looking sort
Right.
of a guy.
Right.
And the idea that he could be beating up Black men was like, that isn't going to happen. I said, see, but that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
If it did happen, would you feel the same? Would you defend him? So that even people who came to fuss at me often would be drawn into a conversation with me about it. But I've never been afraid to say what I think in my work. I think the whole point of being a writer is to find the truth and tell it. And if you're
Absolutely.
not going to do that, you should find another job. And there's no shame in that. You know, you don't have to tell the truth. You can figure out a job where you don't have to say anything at
Right.
all. But the thing for me about being, you know, people say it's so brave, the things you write about. What I have found is that when I write about the things that I'm most afraid of in my own life, most afraid of talking about, most afraid of admitting to, then the next time I go to the post office or to the grocery store, or anywhere where I'm around other people, what mostly women, some men, but mostly women will say to me is, I would have written that if I could write. Thank you for saying that. That's exactly how I feel.
Right.
Thank you for doing it. Thank you for saying it. So that I've had the opposite of bad experiences where people come up and fuss at me. I get
Yeah.
people who hug me in the vegetable department, you know, in the grocery store, because they appreciate what I've said, so that I've been encouraged to tell the truth and to think deeply about what it means to write about these issues and to do it, because everybody isn't a writer. You know, the
Right.
women who were hugging me in the grocery store, they're teaching and being nurses and delivering mail and doing all those other jobs that we depend on people to do. So that while they're doing that, I'm supposed to be writing for them,
Right.
as opposed to just writing something that's going to be just a little thing for me. I'm talking for them because they're doing something else other than writing, but they have a voice, they have an idea, they have stories that deserve to be told, and that's my job. And I take that very seriously. I'm always trying to tell the story straight.
Yes. So listen, now let's talk about the personal aspect of that. So things I should have told my daughter. When you so so
Oh, my business.
when you share all of these journal writings, did you take any out? Because
Oh
you
yeah,
they were
I
too
have
personal.
journals since I was 11 years old. So I've got lots and lots of journals. But in terms of, I think, what you're asking, I was very conscious of the fact that I don't have any secrets. I don't care what people ask me about my, I mean, I'm 74 years old, so that I don't really have any interest in spending a second of the time that I have on this earth trying to hide who I am or what I've ever done or thought or said. But I also know that other people haven't necessarily lived their lives that way. So I wasn't interested in trying to out people, and say,
Right.
let me say the name of this married man. Let me
Right.
say what happened and all that. So the only two people I was concerned about, well, there were actually three. My first husband, who is mentioned in the book, I told him he could read the manuscript, but that there was nothing disrespectful to him. And he paid me a great compliment and said, I don't need to read it. I know that you would never write anything about me that wasn't true. So, whatever you want to do is fine, which I
Wow.
thought was really great. And
Yeah.
which certainly, if I had been trying to be snarky, I would have had to take it out because he thought so much of me.
Mhm.
And my daughter, I said to her, if you want to read it, just to make sure that none of this is more personal than you want. And she said, I lived it. I was there with you. I don't need to read it again. It's fine, Mom. Whatever you want to do. And
Okay.
then I had a friend who, at the time, her wife was working in the White House, and there was all of the, focus on all of those Obama people. And so she's in the book with me, and we were young and wild, getting high and going to rock concerts. And I did not want anyone to find that book and then say, well, now see, this is the kind of people we have working in the White House, dope
Okay.
fiend rock people. So I asked them, and they all were like, my friend was like, no, that was my adventure too. I want it there. So I don't regret anything that I have ever done. I would have done some things differently. Mostly the things that involve lying to somebody. I would have done those differently if I had been stronger. But one of the reasons I wanted to write that book is that young women will come up to me now at the age that I am now
Mhm.
and think, I'm so peaceful and calm and I have everything organized. And of course, that's not true, but they perceive that
Yeah.
from their 20s, and they're like, oh, my life is just a hot mess. What am I, what do I need to do? And I said, you just need to live your life. Everybody's life is a hot mess when they're 20.
Yeah.
Everybody's life is a hot mess when they're 30, 40, 50. And the truth is, life is always messy. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of it. And we
Mhm.
have to keep moving forward. So I wanted to put these journals together to say, look at this, you're seeing me now, but I came from here, from trying to figure out how to tell the truth, how to be in love, how to be a good mother, how to be a writer, all of those things, so that they can see that it's a process, it's a life that we're living. We're not trying to figure it all out by Tuesday. It's like there'll be another problem Wednesday. So you have to continue to do the work that you do and think deeply about what you want to do, what you want to say, and be brave enough to say it.
Hmm. Well, by extension, listen, there are a lot of people like Hakeem Adabuti. He talks about how, he's a mentor of mine here in Chicago. He was my professor. He talks about how um, reading changed his life, basically kind of saved his life, right? So we know the power of books and the power of stories. Oprah was I consider Oprah like an auntie that helped raise me because I watched Oprah every day. And then I would take in information. I didn't agree with everything on Oprah, but I really appreciated Oprah's exploration of things, and then some of the people that I was introduced to through Oprah. So you are one of those people. So she picked what looks like Crazy on an Ordinary Day. That
Yes,
was
she did.
in like 1998. And then I said, again, I didn't read all the books, but that book, I'm like, okay, let me read this. The title was catchy. And I felt free just from reading the book, just
Oh, thank
sharing
you.
her truth. Just from reading the book. I was like, oh, wow, it's so powerful just to see. And it's just empowering to see people stand in their truth. It's like when Maya Angelou, I saw her speak one time, and she talked about how the things she had to do to keep her son in a nice neighborhood where there was a good school. And I was expecting at the time. And I named my daughter Maya because of that encounter, because I'm like, wow, how can she stand there with dignity like that? No shame. And say, as a woman, this is my experience. This is what I did. And then she's just so powerful. And so that's the same thing I get from all of your books. What looks like, I wish I had a red dress, so whenever I put on a red dress, I think about that book, and the freedom to live fully. So can you tell me what that experience was like when you were selected as an Oprah Book Club selection?
It was wonderful. It was really so unexpected. I'm basically trained as a playwright. I had never thought about writing novels at all. But then I had an idea for a story that I wanted to tell that was too big to put on the stage, too many characters, too many settings, all of that. So I decided I would try to write it as a novel. And writing a novel is very different than writing a play. And I was having a really just a difficult time doing it. And then I realized that I was trying to write with Alice Walker on one shoulder and Toni Morrison on the other shoulder. And that is guaranteed writer's block right there.
Okay.
So I said, okay, I need to throw away these 100 pages where I'm trying to be a serious novelist and write as myself, tell this story. And as a playwright, I'm used to writing monologues for people to talk. So that I said, think of this as this woman telling her story to the person who's reading it. Think of it as if it was a play. Let her tell the story. And that really freed me up to find her voice and to do that book. When I turned it in to the editor that I had at the time, the editor hated the book so much. She said, you need to throw this book away. She held it for 6 months. And I'm calling New York saying, is there something wrong? Can I change what I rewrite? What do I need to do? And she finally called me after 6 months and said, this is really terrible. And I'm sorry to tell you, but we can't possibly publish it. You should throw it away. Don't take it to any other publisher, because if you allow this book to be published, you'll never write professionally again. So I hung up the phone. I said, damn, you couldn't tell me no better than that. You had to wait 6 months to say something like that to me. So I was crushed. And I called my friend, BB Moore Campbell, who was also a wonderful
Yes.
writer. And BB said, what did your agent say? And at the time, I didn't have an agent. I was just, moving through the world. The woman who had asked me to write the book was a Black woman, editor from Detroit. I felt like she would look out for me. So I didn't have an agent. And BB sent me the name of Denise Stinson, who who was from Detroit, and Denise said she would read it and let me know if she agreed that it was terrible, and she would tell me. And if it wasn't terrible, she would sell it to someone else, not to worry about it. So I sent it overnight mail. She called me the next day and said, I can sell this book by 5 o'clock. Not a problem. Your editor is crazy. And she sold the book to another publisher so I could pay back the advance I had gotten to the
Wow.
people who did the book. And within a year, Oprah picked it. So of course, all my girlfriends called me up and said, I hope you called that woman and told her about her sorry self. And I said, no, the universe doesn't like it when you gloat.
Right.
And there was no reason to gloat or do anything other than to just be grateful. And I had written about Oprah for Essence magazine. I had written a couple of stories about her for Essence. And when she called me, I thought she was calling because I had just turned in a story about her and she might have wanted to tweak it in some way. So I picked up the phone and I wasn't expecting anything about the book. And I, said, is there something I need to do for that piece to make you feel better about it? She said, no, the piece is perfect. That's not why I'm calling you. So I said, okay, why are you calling me? And she said, we're picking your book for our October book club pick. So, it's that moment where you say to yourself, do not start screaming while this woman is still on the phone. Act like you have some sense. So I did, acted like I had some
Right.
sense and thanked her and all of that, and then got off the phone and went berserk because it's such a wonderful platform that she provides for writers, and it's the people who found me through that book because Oprah held it up. It had already sold 40,000 copies, which is really great for a
Yeah.
first novel.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
after Oprah held it up, it sold 1 million copies. So that the idea of her loaning her audience to us, to all of us who were writing, is such a that there's no way really to thank her for what that was, because she introduced so many of our books and plays, all of that, to people who would not have found us without her. So I think that book club was a very significant national thing that she did, and for me professionally, it was just wonderful because it brought my work to you and to people who might not have already known me, which is part of the challenge. Always, you have to write something good and then you have to figure out how to get it in front of people, and those are two very different things. And Oprah really made that possible for me in a great big way, and I always will be grateful for that.
Okay. So let's talk about this term that you coined, I guess, free womanhood. Free woman. What is that? And then I'm curious to know, because I thought in your books, um, you have such a powerful way of dealing with gender issues, but not bashing. To me, it's not bashing. When I even in I wish I had a red dress. I'm like, she always has a way to let the love shine through, right?
Mhm.
So lovingly, you have whatever you want to say, but it's still always in love. So can you talk a little bit about free womanhood and just what is that? And then how does that shape how you understand relationships with men?
I started saying free women because feminist is such a loaded term in the Black community that so many of my friends, so many Black folks do not want to hear the word feminism because they associate that with white women, not with the Black community, not with our relationships with each other. But I wanted to talk about the fact that what feminism is really talking about is equality, is not necessarily that women hate men, but that women shouldn't be punished for being women. But I wasn't hung up on the word. So I used to say to people, I don't care what we call it. We can call ourselves Amazons. We can call ourselves feminists. We can call ourselves womanists like Alice Walker. We can
Yeah.
just, because what I'm talking about is being a free woman. I want to be a free woman, free to tell the truth, free to take care of myself, free to love whoever I want, free to critique the men that I love if they are behaving in a way that is harmful to me or to my sisters, and to understand that it's possible to do that from a position of love and truth. That doesn't mean that you're bashing, because that's women of my generation. We're very
Yeah.
sensitive to all of that. Intisaki had to carry that weight. Gloria Naylor had to carry
Yeah.
all of that weight. So that the idea of being able to tell the truth is very important, because the backlash that would come, you hate black men, you're bashing black men, and I never had a problem with people ever saying that to me, because I know that's not true. I
Right.
know a range of different kinds of black men. I know some black men who are just amazing and wonderful. My husband is one of them. My dad certainly was one of them. And I know some black men who are really reprehensible, whose behavior is unforgivable, who have done terrible things to the women that they love. So the full range of my brothers exists in my life. So
Mm,
it would be dishonest for me to only write about villainous black men. Black
right.
men are all terrible. They're all violent. That's not true. I know that not to be true. And I also know that all black men are not saints who do the right thing. So that it's critical for me as a writer to be able to write about both, to be able to write fully about all the good stuff and how wonderful it is when everybody's in love and acting right, and how awful it is when, people are not acting right, because none of us are perfect. We're trying to get better.
Right.
We're trying to do the right thing, but we're frightened, we're confused, we're nervous, all of those things. So that I'm always very conscious of trying to present a range, not only of black women, but also of black men, and to write from the position that I know in my own life, which is just being surrounded by wonderful black men who are family, friends, people that I know, people that I've worked with, and also understanding that this is not a question of men on one side, women on the other.
Right.
This is a question of, on one side, people who understand what it means to live in truth and peace, and on the other side, people who don't get that, people who think that men have the right to control women,
Mm,
beat women, all of those things. And what all of us on the side that understand about truth and love are trying to do is to make the others understand that this is not a good way to live. It's not right. It's not appropriate. And this is not the way you can treat other human beings. But it doesn't have to break down on gender. I mean,
right.
anybody can understand that it's wrong to beat women.
Yeah.
Men understand that, and men have to be involved in that discussion, because a lot of men who do not want to hear it from women will respect and listen to a man they respect who says that's not right. You can't treat your wife that way. You can't treat my sister that way. So that men have to be our allies, and that they have to be involved in talking to each other, and they should. Because we are their sisters and mothers and wives and daughters and lovers, and we want them to be in our lives in a peaceful way.
Do you think we've made over the years? Do you think we've made any progress towards women, towards equality? Do you think
I
what?
do.
You
I
know,
do.
yeah.
I do. I think we can talk about it more. I think we have language to talk about it more than we used to.
Mm,
I work with young people in a program every summer, high school students, which is exhausting. High school students, but it's. I do it every summer, and I watch them. I've done it for 14 years, and I have watched them, just the way they talk about issues of gender, the way they talk to each other, how aware the girls and the boys are about gender issues, about violence toward women. And a lot of them have been raised by free women, so
mm,
that they understand these issues in a way that many people of my generation didn't, because there wasn't even conversation about these things. There wasn't vocabulary to describe these things. So I think we've made progress. I think we have a long way to go, not just us as Black people in a Black community, but America is a very violent country. And
mhm.
we're in a very violent moment. Everybody's got a gun. And I'm preaching to the choir, talking to you in Chicago. I mean, I'm in Atlanta, where people are shooting each other over nothing,
Yeah.
nothing at all. So that we're really in a moment of having to understand what kind of culture we're trying to build, and how and why. And they're complicated issues.
Right.
We're frightened, I think, in our country now. We're angry and we're frightened. And
Yeah.
that's when you make the worst decisions of your life, when
Mm,
you are angry and frightened. And we're in the midst of doing it. I mean, look at the House of Representatives. What kind of craziness is that? We can't have a country without a House of Representatives.
right.
So that we're in a moment when people have to hold fast to their sanity, and believe the truth. Get to the truth. Tell the truth. Don't be afraid to speak the truth. And if you're around people who are requiring you to lie, get from around them,
Mm,
because it's not healthy. Leave them behind. Wish them well and leave,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
lies will kill you. It's not good. Not good.
Very powerful. Listen, Atlanta, and since we're talking, when you mentioned Atlanta, Atlanta is like the Mecca. It's the dream place. It's like the for us, it's like the real Wakanda. You know, I've been threatening to move to Atlanta for years, for years. And Perry is laughing because he knows I look at houses all the time. I'm like, well, I love Chicago. I'm born and raised in Chicago, but I also love Atlanta. And I was coming to Atlanta to party, going to 112 and all this stuff for years.
Not 112. Oh my God.
Years. And so I still threaten to when I retire, you know. So I've been looking at houses in Atlanta too, because it just feels like the place. Now, Atlanta is a great case study, kind of, because Black people in America, people of African descent in America, always think, or at least the activist community, kind of think of Brown v. Board, like, okay, well, that's kind of where the mess up kind of happened a little bit. Like we weren't quite ready for that kind of integration because of the way it was put upon us. Instead of, like, it wasn't really integration, it was just desegregation, right?
Mhm.
And so but Atlanta serves for people as, like, I mean, you got all these beautiful Black people, beautiful Black neighborhoods and things like that. So, and my son lived in Atlanta. He went to Morehouse. He loves Atlanta. He lives in Atlanta. My daughter went to Howard, but my son lives in Atlanta, loves Atlanta. So what do you think about, do you think that there's a space, since we're talking about truth and, you know, and inequality, do you think that, having lived in Atlanta all these years, as a place, you know, like Chicago used to be a place, Detroit used to be a place for Black power in this country. Having lived in Atlanta and watched the changes, do you think that it's possible for Black people to find a kind of safe space in this, in America as it's structured? Or do you think, what wisdom can you offer about this push for equality? Is it wrapped up in finding a safe space with like-minded people, not just people of the same ethnicity, but, or what? What do you think about?
Well, I think Atlanta has such a great reputation, and we love that reputation. We foster that reputation, but Atlanta also is a place that has one of the worst income inequality spaces in the country. There are a lot of desperately poor people in Atlanta. There are a lot of homeless people in Atlanta, and you know the Chamber of Commerce doesn't like to talk about it, and people in Atlanta oftentimes will pretend that everything is lovely and nothing is a problem. But we have a real problem with the fact that so many people come here, but they don't have the skills required to live in a big city like this.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of manufacturing going on. There's not a lot of factory jobs. There's not a lot of agricultural jobs, so that people end up kind of falling through the cracks. So there is a lot of poverty, a lot of homelessness, and that we also have had Black political leadership for so long that we're kind of spoiled by it. You know, it's like we've had Black mayors for so long, it's routine. But we have to stop thinking of, now we've got a Black mayor, everything is going to be fine. We
Right.
still have to hold these Black political leaders to the line. You know, there's a big issue here now about something that that activists have started calling Cop City, where they're trying to build a big training facility for the police in a residential neighborhood, in a predominantly residential Black neighborhood, where the people will then used to have a nice green space, and now it will be a place where they can hear the police, you know, testing these weapons and all of that. So there's been a lot of protest about that. And I think sometimes people are confused because it's easier to protest if you're a Black American. It's easier to protest against white people. We're used to that. We have a tradition of that. We can say these white folks are treating us bad, we're not taking it. It's harder to say these Black folks are treating us bad. These Black folks are not compassionate. These Black folks are not listening to their constituents. And it's a much more nuanced kind of protest that has to take place. And we're in the process of understanding that. You know, people in Atlanta, activists in Atlanta, how does that, what does that look like? But I think Atlanta has such a great resource in these Black colleges that are here. Every June, all of these children come out and they love Atlanta. They want to stay in Atlanta. So many of them. So we have bright new people with new ideas, new faces, new things that they want to do who are graduating into Atlanta every single year. And that I think is an inexhaustible, wonderful resource. But we have to work on the same things that the rest of the country has to work on. We have to work on angry young people who do not see a future for
Yeah.
themselves, who are well armed, who will shoot each other over nothing, nothing at all, because they're demanding respect. You know, you disrespected me in the line at the Chick-fil-A. You disrespected me in the line at the grocery store. All
Yeah.
of those things, and then somebody gets killed about that. So there's a lot of rage. There's a lot of Atlanta looks like a dream from the outside, but it's not a dream for me, and I'm mad about it. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do something violent about it. So we've got problems that we need to deal with, but I think we can, because there are a lot of people here who want this city to be what we keep saying it is,
Mhm.
and who are prepared to work for that. And I'm one of them. I love Atlanta, and I understand the flaws that we have. I weep at the violence among our young people, how they're shooting each other, and I weep at the vestiges of the racist violence that still exists here. You know, where a young black man can be jogging in a neighborhood and get shot to death. You know, so that there are all the problems that America has, but
Yeah.
we're working on it. And we have such a good climate too. I know you make these feelings about Chicago probably in February, don't you? When that
Right.
when
Exactly. Exactly.
you come down Michigan,
Exactly.
that can make you change. I remember being blown one February from the sidewalk, and I was being blown right into the middle of the street. And I realized what those chain things are for is to grab it, because it's
Yes.
like, oh God, I grew up in Detroit, but we don't have that wind coming off Lake Michigan like y'all
Yes.
do.
Right. 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 That is when I
That's, that's the time, right?
yes. Listen, I love what you said, because that's the point that I've gotten to in my study of African culture, as an African person, is that it's really no place to run to.
Right.
It's no
Exactly.
place to run to. No place to
Yep.
run to. Everywhere needs work. We're gonna have to change these systems, change our minds and things, because there's no place to run to. I'm gonna ask you one more question, then I'm gonna give Perry a chance to ask something. And that is, so Dr. Jones was the professor. He was never my professor, but he's professor of people I was really close to. And through him, I got wind of Tayari Jones, right? And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know that when somebody told me, well, you got to read a book. I was interviewing somebody at Chicago State or somewhere, doing something for somebody, and they mentioned I hadn't read her book. Then I read her book, and I saw that she said that you were a mentor and an influence. So let me ask you a bit about that, about mentoring. Do people often come to you who just really love your work? You mentor all of us, whether we know you or not, through your work, right? And then through seeing you talk in interviews and things like that. So you're a mentor, I'm sure, to far more people than you can imagine. But through these people who have direct contact with you, what is some of the basic advice that you give to writers? Some basic things that you would give to writers?
Well, Tayari was actually my student when I was teaching at Spelman. She
Oh,
was my student. So I have two students, former writing students, who are best-selling authors. Tayari is one, and right behind me, perhaps you can see Stacey Abrams back there. She was
oh, wow.
also my student at Spelman. So they were two of the best students you can imagine. They were fabulous and wonderful. But both of them came to me, after class and said, okay, I don't think the rest of these girls are serious. I'm serious. I want to be a writer. Tell me what I should do. And so I would meet with them one-on-one, because they were already serious writers. And I said what I always say, which is write every day. You
Hmm.
have to write every day, in the same way that if you were a dancer, you would take dance class every day. If you were a musician, you would play scales every day. You would practice, and you have to do it as a writer. You have to get into the habit of looking at the world with a writer's eye.
Yeah.
So you have to keep a journal, write down what you saw at the end of the day, write down what you're feeling, so that you can become accustomed to looking at your own feelings and your own thoughts. And from that, be able to look at characters in the way that is necessary for a writer. But I was so honored to have both of them as students and have kept in touch with them. They're still, young women that I am very proud to have been a part of their journey, because they're both incredible, incredible women.
Wow, that is really powerful, especially for Stacey Abrams, because when you think of her articulation and her ability to tap in and understand, that would be a skill of a great writer,
And
So
she came to
finding
me
that
and
voice.
said, she said, I want to go into public service. And this is, she's like a sophomore probably at Spelman when she was in my class. She said, I want to go into public service, but I need to have a way to make a living while I'm doing it, because I know they don't pay much to be in the Georgia legislature and all of that. So I want to learn how to write romance novels so that I can support
Wow.
myself while I'm doing public service work. I said, I can help you. You got to have people falling in love. They have to have a problem. They solve the problem. They end up in love. That's a romance novel. We can help you do that. So
Okay.
she wrote actually under a pseudonym, under a pen name for years as a romance novelist. So she did write before she became the Stacey Abrams that we know and started writing under her own name. She actually did what she said she wanted to do. She wrote romances.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Perry, I'm going to give you, I gobbled up all most of the time. Perry, I'm going to give you a little time. You have
No,
anything?
actually, I just really enjoyed the conversation. I think the one thing that was I was thinking about is what inspires you today, in your writings today and the things that you're thinking about. I know we touched a little bit. I know that you're activists and the things going on, but anything particular that you tap into?
I'm really interested at this moment in intergenerational conversations. I really want to write things where people are talking across the years, across generations, so that there are grandmothers talking to granddaughters, because I'm now a grandmother. So that I want to be able to foster that kind of communication. Oftentimes, people who are my age talk to young people like this. We talk down to them. I know everything, and this is what you need to do, and that never works. I didn't like it when I was young, and I don't, but I'm older. So that I'm always looking for stories these days where I can have different generations of people talking together across those years, and see if they can share information. Because we certainly, having lived as long as many of us have been blessed to live, we have some good information if we've been paying attention. But young people have a lot of good information too, because they're growing up in a different world. When I listen to people my age say, when I was 15, this happened and that happened, and I'm saying that doesn't count. It's all different. You didn't have TikTok to deal with. You
Right,
didn't have Facebook
right.
to deal with. You didn't have Instagram to deal with. You didn't have all of the craziness that they're dealing with every day, that is just coming into their brains every day. So talking about what you did when you were 15, it's like those old cliches about somebody saying, I had to walk miles in the snow to get to school and all that. It's
Right.
like, that may be true, but that doesn't help the kid today who is not doing that. That doesn't help a kid for you to say, I figured it all out when I was 15. You should figure it out. We have to listen to them. What is making them miserable? What's making them happy? What do they like about how this world is proceeding? What do they believe in? And so many young people are not optimistic. They feel like climate change is going to melt the world before they get old enough to even take care of it. They are frightened to death of violence in their schools. They've been doing active shooter drills since they were in kindergarten,
Yeah,
and now these children are in high school. That means something to your brain. That's that kind of fear. I was never afraid to go to school,
right.
ever. So that they're afraid every day, and they've had the drills where they're not sure if it's a drill or if somebody's really in the hall with an automatic weapon walking toward their class.
Mm.
And we have to be aware that they have some things to tell us too, and that they have some righteous anger at us
Yeah,
for handing them this world. So we can't get defensive when they say, what the hell are y'all doing? I can't go to fifth grade without getting shot at. What are y'all doing? And we get defensive and say, well, and it's like, no, we have to answer that question and
yeah,
say, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to fix this. I'm working on this for you, for your future, because I believe in you and because I love you. You're our children. We can't just kind of say, well, too bad. You got to figure it out. They need us, and we definitely need them. So I'm looking for stories with people talking across generations to see. I remember my granddaughter coming to me because she really liked Lil Wayne, the rapper. And so I said, oh, I always used to listen to whatever music my daughter was listening to. It's like, oh, Tupac. And it's like, I'm listening to this one, listening to that one. And I got to Lil Wayne. I was like, oh, okay. Okay, I can do it. I can listen to it. But it's like, being the grandmother, you got those earphones on, and I'm saying, my little baby granddaughter is
Right.
listening to this. But, I'm calm. And then you take the earphones off and say, oh, okay, baby, what do you like about that? And then go and put a
Yes,
coat on you,
exactly.
a glass of
Yep.
wine, and say, oh, I'm not going to ask them what kind of music they like anymore. But I
Right.
do, because I want to know what's
Yeah.
going into their brain. What is making them think, what ideas about love are they getting from Lil Wayne in the same way that I was getting ideas about love from the Temptations?
Mhm.
Different message, different kind of love. But I
Yeah.
have to figure out, what are my granddaughters going to do with that information? What are they going to do with Lil Baby in their brain? What are they
Right.
going to do with all of that? And I have to keep up with it, as much as it's hard for our ears to hear what they're listening to. We got to do it. So then we can talk. Then we can talk, but we can't talk without information. So that's what I'm interested in now, trying to foster that conversation.
I think that's really cool because I'm really blessed to have my grandparents, my grandma's still around. And so my daughter, who's 21, it's just really interesting to sit back and hear them talk because, it's like both my grandparents come up from the South. And so things that my daughter had, looked at in history books or whatever, kind of been glanced over, just to see, their interactions and just actually how things were. And like you said, just kind of, Thena talks about how things are today, versus that, and just seeing some of the commonalities and what are different. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool to have that passed down. So
Yeah.
And it's different. Grandparents talk, you can talk different to your grandchildren than you do to your children,
Yeah.
because with your children you're so involved in trying to do it right, and your ego is involved, and are they messing up, am I a good mother, all that. With grandchildren, you kind of can relax a little, because you're the grandparent. The parent has to worry about all that stuff, and you can talk to the grandchild in a different kind of way, which is a real sweetness, I think. So that's lovely that your daughter is having a chance to have that opportunity, because grandmothers, we want to talk to them. We want to tell them what we know. If they want to hear it, we won't be quiet. We keep talking.
I love this idea of intergenerational focus as well because and especially through stories, right? If we can make story, because a little baby, the Wayne, all them, I had a similar thing with my son with Kanye. He had college dropout. I was like, oh, you can't listen to that in here. Then my son said, you haven't even heard it. Then I listened to it and I understood it. Because
Mhm.
we had a conversation about it, the core concepts sound familiar, the frustrations, And so I think if we could have stories where we get young people to, where we acknowledge the abstract violence. See, we notice the shooting and things like that, but abstract violence, like the uh, miseducation or
Mhm.
education that makes you hate yourself or
Yeah.
devalue yourself. The environments that we have these young people in. If we have stories that are honest, then that violence will show up, and we see the reaction to that violence with people using the only tools that they think they can fight with, right? And so
Yeah.
we writers know and educators know that we have the tool of language. We can write something, we can change things. But young people, I often say that to my peers, young people, they who haven't been educated, well, they don't have that tool. So
They do.
they get the iron, they get the gun, they can fight well. They get the only tool that they have. And that's what kind of, when I see that, that's what I feel sad about. That, like you said, they're angry. You feel assaulted. You don't even know who's assaulting you or how. You just at the edge of it, and you're not gonna take no more. So it's over
Right.
any little thing. So I like that idea of us nurturing, even making space for a new generation of writers and showing them, giving them that tool so they could help us to see what those problems are. So what brings you, what are you most hopeful about looking at the future for your grandchildren?
Um, I'm hopeful about the fact that young people are starting to feel like they have agency.
Mm.
Like they can go to Congress and go to the state legislatures and demand things and say, we demand some control over these guns. We demand that you do something about climate change, but that they are beginning to see that it's their world and
Yeah.
claim it, rather than just sitting down saying, well, everything's going to hell, we don't know what to do. But to
Right.
say, let's 10 of us get together and go downtown and talk to the mayor.
Mm.
Let's go to the state legislature and sit in at the state legislature. Let's go to Congress and talk to the people there. And I'm very hopeful about that, that I think young people are beginning to feel like, okay, these old folks don't know what they're doing. Let's see if we can do better. And
Mm.
they, that's the way of the world. They are supposed to step up and do better. Because as much as we 60s people think we're going to be here forever, we're not. And
Right.
we need somebody to be able to step up and take it and keep it moving.
Do you think you ever would, in your things I should have told my daughter, you said in one of the journal writings that you said to your dad, something you're going to do something, you said, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to be a preacher. I might be a preacher or something like that. Do you think, was that ever real for you? Like, did you think that you would ever be a preacher?
No, but I do think writing is kind of like that.
Yeah,
Especially the kind of writing that I do, because I'm so influenced by the role my dad played in my life. But I don't feel qualified to be a spiritual leader of people in the way that a minister would have to do. But I definitely feel like I am someone who can inspire people
yeah,
to behave in a way that is admirable. I can inspire them to reach for the best that's already in them that they may be afraid of. Can I tell this truth? Can I be this who I really am? I think that I'm good at that, in giving people permission without judgment
mm,
to be who they are. Because I think that's the gift that you give people that you care about. Don't judge them. Have compassion for people, and allow them the space to show you who they are. And then you can either love that being or not love that being, but don't tell them, don't be yourself, because I don't like it. That makes me uncomfortable. It's like I'm the opposite of that. I'm like, be yourself, show me who you are, and then we'll figure
right.
out how to move around with that. But just be yourself, be yourself.
So listen, we've held you. I don't want Jeanette to call me later and say, what you trying to keep on the phone all day? So let me ask this final thing. Where can we find you? Where can people follow you on social media, or can people come to your class? Because I'm sure somebody would move to Atlanta to come to your class.
That's terrible. I feel bad now because I don't teach anymore. And in terms of teaching in an organized way at Spelman or one of the colleges, I do some workshops and all. I'm actually the artist in residence. I'm distinguished artist in residence at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. That sounds like such a big title. Like I have to sit up straight when I say distinguished artist in
Okay.
residence. But it's so that's where I do the work that I do in the summer with young people. I used to do social media, but I stopped doing it because it demanded too much attention. If you're really going to keep up with that stuff, I'd be sitting in there trying to figure out something interesting to say, and I said I could be writing a play. I'm trying to figure
Right.
out something to say on Instagram and Facebook. I'm not doing that, so
Yeah.
I don't really do much of that anymore. But I do do some teaching through the Alliance Theater. So I don't know how to tell people to keep up with me. I mean, just Google me and see what I'm up to. I guess
I was gonna
that'll
say,
be the best thing.
any new plays or new books coming out?
Well, I have actually a new play called Something Moving, a meditation on Maynard, which is looking at the 50th anniversary of Maynard Jackson's election as our first African American mayor in Atlanta. And it's currently at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. And then next year we'll be doing it in Atlanta. But that's my newest one. And then I have another play that I hope is going to Broadway next year, but I can't talk about that one yet.
Okay.
I'm still writing. I can't imagine my life if I wasn't writing. I always say when I finish a big project, okay, I'm going to just sit down. I'm not going to write anything for 6 months. And
Mhm.
that lasts for about 3 weeks. And
Right.
then I can't do it. I can't
Like
process the
breathing.
world. What
Yeah.
can I do? So my family is always like, please write something. Please go back to write.
Right.
But
Okay.
it's just, I think that's the way that I process the world. I understand the world. So I'm always working on something new.
Okay. Well, do you have any questions for us? Any
I
questions
just
for us
thank you all
about?
so much for this interview, and I thank Chicago for honoring me by having my work all over town. I love Chicago, and I've always had such great experiences with the theater community in Chicago. That it just was such a wonderful idea when they suggested it to me, when Susan Booth at the Goodman called me and asked me if I would be, up for having this kind of festival. And how could I possibly say no? I said, of course. Do you think anybody will come? She said, of
Yes,
course they would. So
absolutely.
I'm very honored that that's happening, and I love Chicago. So I'm just very grateful, and thank you all for spending this time with me this morning.
Well, we thank you for agreeing to come and talk to us. There are a couple of your plays being in rotation in Chicago right now. And then people can go pick up any of your books still, and
Yeah,
have experience. And as a writer, I just want to say thank you so much for kind of teaching us uh, that we have the right to be free and to tell the truth. I love it. Everybody I know loves your work. We, in our MFA program, we read you, and so this has been a great honor for me just to have a moment to talk with you. And we thank you very much for spending this time with us.
thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.